in progress. Recording in progress.
Hey, this is Jon Johnson, the Mortgage Music Man, with a few people today for our Mortgage Market Mastermind with myself, Jon Johnson, and Gabriela Cernas Frantz.
Morning.
A couple special guests. Tanya Canarte is here as well, once again.
Good morning.
Doing her thing. And the lovely Ronda Johnson, aka my mother, aka Grandma. How you doing today?
Good morning. Doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Good. It's good to have you here. Well, hey, introductions are over. Let's just jump straight into it. All right. So the goal of this YouTube page and my business in general is to help people to become debt-free through home ownership. So what happens in this podcast is we discuss mortgage and real estate news that has occurred in the past 30 days. Today is August 13th, so some of this information could be outdated within the next couple of weeks, but we're going to try to hit some of the most important topics that have happened recently. I'll start with some rates, some numbers, some market data, and then we'll transition into some more wide-ranging topics. I also will have the topics stamped in the description so you can be able to easily find the topics that you want to be able to listen to. All right. So before we start, what has been on your mind lately in the mortgage industry? Let's start with our special guest, Ronda. Go ahead.
Oh, wow. Put me on the spot.
Of course.
So the primary interest that I have is generated by what my clients are interested in, and that's where is this interest rate? Where are things going? How stable is our economy? Is it really a good time to buy a house?
Good. You are correct. It's unfortunate. In my opinion, it's always a good time to buy a house, and it's not because I'm in the industry. It's just because, if it's a need for it, then it's always a good time because, no one knows where rates are going to go, but all the economists definitely point towards house prices continue to increase. But unfortunately, buyers hear the news, and when they hear rates are going up in the news, they all, stop shopping, and as soon as it goes down 0.25%, everyone comes out of the woodworks. Gabriela, what has been in your mind lately in the industry, please?
Right now we're going through the transitional shift, so there's a lot of information that's outdated that is still being pushed into the media, into the consumers. So right now, a lot of consumers are getting very mixed information. So while they're getting real-time information about where the economy's at, where we're heading, and yes, the Fed rates are always going to be there. They're going to impact everything when it comes to the grand scheme of like the economy itself. How we're impacted is different. And so the consumers, they're just not educated in that aspect. So when they hear interest rates are going up, they don't understand how that actually truly affects whether you're able to buy now or not. And for the most part, we kind of stand by our realtor partners when we say it's always a good time to buy, because when you buy, you're not tied down to that home forever. And that could be a change you can do later down the road. It's just some people have to buy in times when it may not seem ideal, but the interest rate can always change. So right now, it's just educating the consumer again. I think that is our main job in the lending industry, as in the real estate industry, is just constantly being a source of education, and also that we're accountable for the information that we're providing in a timely manner. I like how you introduced, like, hey, today's date is August 13th, and some of this information will maybe be outdated in about a week or two.
It will.
So that is being very, responsible with the information we're providing, so that we're good stewards to our clients and our realtor partners.
You got it. Marry the house, date the rate.
Yeah.
Tanya, what's going on your mind?
Basically piggybacking on what Gabriela said, just learning ways on how to inform my clients better.
Yeah.
In the industry. But yeah, our news changes every day.
Yeah.
Rates change like every couple hours.
Yeah.
If I may add on this a little bit.
Sure.
And this is kind of bringing everything together. Just like politics, real estate is local. So when we're listening to these national averages, yes, we really need the professionals who work in the area to kind of peel that onion a little bit and tell us what's going on in our local markets. Yes. And so in the state of Florida, at least in Central Florida, where you're seeing the average rate for a one-bedroom apartment ranging between $400 to $1,700 a month. Now you compare that to a purchase price of a home and what type of home you could get for that amount, then that kind of brings it into perspective of why it's always still a good time to buy a home.
You got it. It's a local game, and we have a lot of local data today. A lot of it that obviously all of you ladies have seen already, or not. So first, like you guys mentioned, everyone cares about rates. So we're going to start off first with rates. These are going to be the rates historically. It's good to put into perspective because many buyers and real estate agents really don't know what it looks like from a historical perspective, the rate. So overall, as you can see, we probably average towards a 7 to 8% interest rate over the past 40 years. We've had some very big highs in the 1980s. We got up into 17, 18, 19% interest rates on average. Even in the 1990s, it was still around 8, 9, 10%. Recently, we got towards the lowest interest rates of all time, which a lot of people, if they bought a house for the first time or they refinanced recently, they were able to capitalize on that rate, but that's not guaranteed to be there. And many experts don't see us hitting that low of 2%, et cetera, that we hit last year. But when it comes historically, though, as you can see, we are still, even if we're around maybe 5.5%, 6%, we're still doing very good historically when it comes to interest rates. Last 12 months, and we'll chat about this slide. This is where we've kind of been at over the last 12 months. So it was at the low. Everyone was just, having a grand old time, tons of refinances. And then over the past 6 months or so, you can see the increase in interest rates. There are many things that influence interest rates and many things that people don't know about, many things that the president put something out there, especially the last president that we had. Anytime he would tweet about almost anything, especially China, that would send interest rates going up and down, or like them or not, that was just how it works. There's other small economic factors, but the biggest factor is going to be inflation. Inflation is the biggest factor toward interest rates, and if inflation increases, then interest rates increase as well. So that's been a big trend, is inflation going up. With the highest levels right now that we've been in a good amount of time. And they are seeing potentially inflation starting to go down towards the end of this year. But for the time being, we are on this slight roller coaster toward the top. But as you can see, it doesn't mean you're always going to be going up continuously. It did have some over the past couple of weeks where it went down, which is counterintuitive because there was a Fed rate hike, which I made a couple of videos about. There was a rate increase of 0.75, and over the past 6 months, it's gone up about 2.5%. But yet, as you can see, it's not directly correlated to the Fed rate because our interest rates for mortgages went down a little bit. But looking at this slide, the past couple of slides when it comes to rates, what are your opinion on what you're seeing right now? Ronda Johnson, please.
Okay, thank you.
My mother.
Thank you for asking me this. Because when you talk about inflation, it's a very important point. So one important point I like to emphasize with my clients is when you are purchasing a house, unless you have an adjustable rate mortgage, you're getting a locked-in interest rate. So regardless of what happens with inflation or the economy, your rate is locked. Whereas when you're renting, your rate is going to adjust annually, a lot of times based upon those inflationary factors, because for the person that owns that home, the maintenance has to be factored into that. And all of the supplies and the goods that it takes to maintain those homes are going to be based upon what they're able to go out there and purchase in the market. So there's a benefit to home ownership, whether you're an investor or whether you are someone that's actually purchasing a home. And regardless of the interest rates, there's still benefits to having that real estate asset.
Agreed. I appreciate that. Thanks. Gabriela, what do you feel about rates over the past 12 months, historically, et cetera?
In the last 12 months, it felt like an emotional roller coaster for a lot of people. And then, here when we talk about in our branch and our office, there was a lot of chatter about rates, because, but it felt like it was more prominent in our industry, that we were constantly talking about it, but we weren't talking about it in the sense of like, okay, let's worry about it. It was more in the sense of like, hey, this is what's coming, or this is what's happened. This is what you need to do to prepare your clients. It was more of a like, let's deal with the fact that this is happening. How can we educate our buyers? Getting the worry that maybe now is not a good time to buy, and people who were maybe interested a month ago, now they see this news and like, no, I think I'm going to hold off because, you know, at some point in time, your why to decide to buy a home is always going to be there. It may change for many different reasons, but it's not going to necessarily, it shouldn't be skewed because the interest rates are variables. Now, I got what you said about, you know, the ARMs. My parents, you know, did have one in 2002. That's what they got into. And we did refinance, you know, before rates hit low, but they're still at a very quick rate. But it came from me being in the industry that actually talked about it. So I was able to say, look, we need to do X, Y, and Z because this is going to help set you up financially in the event one of you loses an income. Lo and behold, we're talking about how that did happen.
Yeah,
you know, a couple, you know, few years later. So our job is to help educate our buyers, our prospecting buyers who are entering the market, because they're just as nervous about what they're hearing, and they need a trusted voice with education and reasoning that could say it is okay. You know, first of all, you don't walk away until you get the home. You know, that's an educational piece right there. And whether we're seeing the chart go up and down, and then the you know, did increase, but our rates, you know, slightly dipped. You know, that was another opportunity for us to say, hey, listen, let's give you an example. Even though the news said, you know, the Fed rates were going up, look at how the interest rates were kind of affected by that. So stay in the game, look for the home, get out of being a renter if you no longer want to be a renter, and or you know, make a decision about, because no matter what, and your rent's going to go up, so you're paying 100% interest for your landlord as well. You know, we keep reminding people of that. And as far as interest rates, that can change later on down the road. And I like what you mentioned that, you know, historically speaking, we may not see those 1% and 2% for quite some time because there was a lot of factors that went into that happening, and they weren't good factors. they were necessary factors to be able to restabilize and re-energize the economy because of what had happened with the pandemic and worldwide, you know, because the U.S. economy also affects the world economy as well. And so, you know, one consumer is just, you know, one part of such a bigger scheme as well. So
good. So I want to piggyback on a couple points you just stated.
Yeah.
For one, like when it comes to all the information I'm trying to pump onto YouTube, Facebook business page, etc., I'm mainly doing it to try to battle the news.
Yeah.
I know the news, they're only going to put out a headline that's going to be able to try to get people to look at that headline, go to their page, that way they can be able to sell advertisements, etc. My goal is not to sell advertisements. My goal is to be able to get people to be debt-free through home ownership. So we have completely different goals, the news and myself, for what we're trying to do. So when I'm hosting these videos, when I'm having people that are knowledgeable, Gabriela in marketing, Tanya, myself, for Loan Originators, my mother who's a real estate agent in the Orlando area, I'm hosting this to be able to give you a perspective from the real estate side, and like you were saying, also from a local side as well. If you're in the Florida, Tampa Bay area, Central Florida area, this is going to highly affect you more. Even with the national data, we're better at talking about national data than, you know, your Joe Schmo news person. So we're hosting this to be able to give you better information about what's going on in the market. Also, once again, just to hit it, once you're in the business, we know that these rates are changing all the time.
Yeah.
And the main difference between us and someone who's not in business is we're not really thinking. If rates dip down to low enough, standard, even though, you know, we made a borrow a house a couple years ago, we made a refinance a couple years ago. If it gets to a low enough point, everybody in our office is going to say refinance now, refinance now, refinance now. I mean, 2 years ago when those rates hit those lows, our entire office refinanced at that point in time. And then guess what? Last year,
and I called you.
everybody, we're not waiting. There's buyers out there that we actually reached out to. We're like, hey, you have a 6-7% interest rate. Rates are at 2% right now. Go ahead and capitalize. We don't know how long these rates are going to go. And buyers go, oh, I got to think about it. And then they start thinking way too much. This isn't something to really think about. Like, we're here to, there are refinance shops. There are some shops that are out there that are only just trying to get you to refinance. And they're trying to get a quick dollar. So you want to stay away from those, but they're trying to get you to be able to refinance at any point in time. But if you're dealing with a loan originator or real estate agent that actually cares about you, which there are tons of us out there, if it's a bad time to refinance, we'll actually tell you, hey, you can, but we recommend you not to refinance with the numbers that we're seeing.
But that's where the relationships come in, right?
Exactly.
So
You're
with
correct.
Tanya, with you, with Gabriela, those relationships come in. So just like you have advisors in your pocket, it's important. Yes, go out and do your research on the internet, but then bring that research to someone that all they do is eat, sleep, and drink that stuff. Like I eat, sleep, and drink houses. I know you all eat, sleep, and drink the mortgage industry.
Yeah.
So I'll call you if there's something that stumps me. I may not know all the answers, you may not know all the answers, but because we eat, sleep, and drink this, we're able to research it or make connections. And I think that's very important because if it does not make dollars, we're going to tell you it does not make sense. And so even let's do a comparison with these interest rates fluctuating or going very high from our perspective. Historically, they're still very low, as you're saying. So let's take, if I rented a house at $1,000 a month, right? Over 1 year, that's $12,000. 5 years, that's $60,000. If I owned that same house, I might have had a mortgage. Let's pretend my mortgage was the exact same amount. I still have, you're still going to get some type of equity in that home over time. Now, a lot of us got shaken by what happened around 2008-ish. That was a once in a lifetime event. But historically, if you look beyond that, housing is where it is. It's where it rocks. And that's why I love it so much. And I thank you all for always being there when I call and need some guidance in that area, even myself.
You got it. This is a bedrock industry. Tanya, what would you have to say about rates last 12 months, some of the things that ladies have stated, et cetera?
To add on to what you lovely ladies said, I think you guys said it all. All of you guys.
Thanks. I
I
appreciate
wasn't
that.
calling you a lady.
No problem. I know I'm not a
No.
lady. I try not to be.
But
I
it's
try very
okay.
hard.
It's okay.
Try very hard not to be. It's not in my DNA. All right. So Black Knight Data. This is just some quick little mortgage data that comes out because they're the main company that we actually lock rates in with. We do rate pricing, things of that nature. It's from Black Knight. So total lock volumes were down 14% from June, with decline seen in both rate and term. 16% for rate and term refinance have gone down. Cash outs have gone down 14%, and purchase loans have gone down 14% as well when it comes to the people locking those rates in month over month, which accounts, and also the purchase loans accounts about 82% of all lock activity, which a year ago, purchase loans are probably like less than 50% of lock activity. It was more refinances. What would you have to say about this? What do you think about this data?
Okay, so I'm going to need you to paraphrase that into common language for me.
So we'll do Gabriela and then we'll do you.
Okay, thank you.
Gabriela.
So my first question is, we're looking at national data or we're looking at local data?
This is national.
Okay, all right. So that helps, to paint a bigger picture as to like what data that we're looking at. So as far as what we're looking at, it makes sense as far as like when it comes to like the inventory in the housing market. So when we're talking about, why volumes were down, it has also, like how much inventory is available nationwide. If we localize it here, which that's not what this data is actually, necessarily specifically saying, because our local data is going to be a little bit more different. But nationally speaking, when we're looking at the big states, New York, California, Texas, and of course, Florida, like literally the corners of the country, looking at the inventory of metropolitan areas where people are moving to or moving from, that's where we're looking at as far as like when it comes to volume, and why it's down, from June also has a lot to do with the fact that there's been, they've lose jobs. We are going to talk a little bit about, the job numbers, and if we don't mention it, there has the job numbers before they come out. It looks more favorable, which is kind of counting a little bit of the inflation fears. However, there's the consumers themselves are just kind of, it feels like it looks like they're kind of stuck. Like they're not sure. They're very unconcerned, or they don't feel
keyword.
Yes,
the key
that's really
confidence.
like it's like when it finally puts together like the words like they just don't feel confident in the real estate market right now. And that will attribute to consumer power, buying power, and what they're doing in the real estate. Inventory is a factor. The cost of homes have increased is a factor, and people are getting priced out of where they could normally be able to afford. 3-4 years ago, the average home was about anywhere between like 175 to 250. And we're talking about median income household. We're not talking about luxury home. We're talking about the average consumer that makes up the bulk of the buying power. That's the numbers that now the average is anywhere between low 300s, 350, 375. And if wages didn't increase for them, they're priced out.
And Gabriela, you'll be surprised. Now you're talking my language because I can talk inventory all day long. So we still have a very strong seller's market
Yes.
in the greater Central Florida area. That includes, when I'm looking at data, we actually share the same MLS between Orlando area and the Tampa area. So I looked at pure data, and what you'll find is right now, believe it or not, as of June, the average purchase price was over 400,000. So you think about the average salaries in that area.
Good
That's
job.
exorbitant. Now, a year ago, we had 1 month worth of inventory. That is just unbelievable.
We're still kind of in that.
Well, we're at 2 months now.
Oh,
but it's
that's fresh.
we're
Fresh
at
off
2
the press.
months now, but it's still a very, very strong seller's market.
Yes.
Now, when people are looking at buying and having their confidence, the things they're looking at are, what are the job markets looking like?
Right.
What are the economies looking like? What's that stability? And so we had a lot of media attention on, the economy. But the bottom line is people still need somewhere to live.
Yeah.
You have to have somewhere to live.
Yeah.
And once we start really putting it into perspective, and that's why these relationships are so important, because we're able to talk people off the ledge, so to speak. In other words, okay, so this is what you're hearing. This is what it means in our market, in our local community.
Correct.
And this is what it can mean for you.
Yeah.
Each person has a unique set of circumstances, and that's why that relationship helps us to put it all into perspective.
Correct. And also when sellers, because it is still, I said in the last podcast, we're entering maybe like a more little buyer-friendly market. And just buyer-friendly because homes are a little bit longer, on the market than typically like what we were used to seeing, the 20, 30 contracts for one home within one day as soon as the listing, but sellers are also concerned that they're entering the buyer's market. So,
There's that.
yeah. So when you may have the advantage of being the seller, but then you also enter into that buyer's market as well. I will point out as far as when the data mentions about cash out refinances, a little bit of vernacular for the industry. How we have seen a decline as far as in the numbers in our company, but in the last couple years, we were still 70% purchase and 70% refinance, and that was still strong numbers even for us. But that was a very well balanced book, if you want to say, hey, not all your eggs are in one basket. Not all your eggs are in the refi basket. And those companies, as you mentioned earlier, that's all they were doing. So those particular companies did get affected. Those employees did have to, did unfortunately lose their job. I may be straying off a little bit, but there is certainly a lot of.
There are, and one of the biggest things, especially this time of year between May, June, and July, a lot of families like to relocate between the school years.
Yes.
So sellers often put the houses on the market around that time because they anticipate it's the best time to sell. But really, there's any good time to sell when you put it in perspective. But one of the challenges our buyers were having that kind of helped attribute it to this cooling a little bit is that they felt as though they were competing with the big box shops who were coming in and buying homes for inventory, for rental, for whatever reason. So if you have an all cash buyer, and here it is, they're going over the appraised value, and I don't have that much cash in my pocket. How do I handle that? And so, I know that I've worked with you all to get creative in some of the packages that we're able to offer people, but that's one of the concerns as well, that those are all factors that have gone to what we're seeing now.
Yeah.
I have seen So it's kind of shifted what we expected from the May, June, July. Now it's picking up again.
Yeah, I have seen that. My realtor partners have seen that as well.
Good. Any
Our buyers.
additional comments on the data?
Nope, you guys are doing a great job. Love it.
You got it. I'll make one additional note of what you two stated.
Yeah.
For one, refinances still make sense. Yes, refinances are down, but they still make sense. If you are a buyer and you have a mortgage and we have mortgage insurance on that mortgage, that mortgage insurance could be $300 a month. It could still work out for you to get a refinance to get that mortgage insurance off. It could potentially still work out for you to get a refinance if you're trying to go from a 30-year to a 15-year. That's the main game, if I'm being honest with you. You don't want a 30-year mortgage. You want a 15 or a 20-year mortgage. That's going to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars of interest over the life of the loan. So I recommend that more. So if you're trying to, if you feel comfortable with your monthly payments that you have right now, even if your interest rate goes up percentage points, you're still going to be saving hundreds of thousands of dollars of interest by going from a 30-year to a 15 or 20-year. And then lastly, the housing industry is ran, and from what I'm seeing with this data, because I'll show you some data later on that's showing how strong the market still is. I would assume that the market is being run by buyers that were pre-approved in the past. Buyers that have been looking for 6 months, 12 months, year and a half, because this is showing you that the pre-approved buyers are down, but yet the housing market is still very strong in a majority of metros and counties. Did you have to, or are you good?
Yes. No, my client is here.
You got it. I'm looking out for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for being on, Tanya. I appreciate it having you. Of course.
Excuse me.
Tanya's a busy lady.
Clients first. Thank you. And then we gotta go this way. Musical chair.
Sure. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
All right. We got a little more intimate now.
How about the musical chairs?
Yeah. All right. And she makes the fun stuff too. This is okay stuff. This is more boring stuff in my opinion compared to some of the fun data that we'll be seeing later on today. So it was nice for Tanya to be here, but it's unfortunate to miss some of the fun stuff. All right. So MBS Highway Data. So this is the main place that your top mortgage people go to be able to get information on what's happening in the market. Barry Abebe runs this, and I'm not a fan of having multiple gurus. I don't need to have 10 gurus telling me what's happening in the market. Yeah, I get data from different places, but if I'm trying to listen to one person and see what's their opinion as an economist on what's happening, my main person I'm going to is Barry Abebe out of MBS Highway. So thanks for the data. But here's a couple of data that they put out on one of their little points. And I'll read them, and you ladies just tell me which one sticks up to you the most. So down but still up. The cost of shipping a 40-foot container from China to West Coast USA went from $2,500 in June of 2020 to $20,000 in 2021 to $9,500 now in 2022. That's a crazy number. It was a big backup, and if you saw some of the photos and images about what was happening in China, their backup is crazy. When you talk about shipping, prices of goods, inflation, I mean, a lot can be, put to that. I'm not a crazy economist. I did, do some economic stuff in the past, but that right there tells me there's a big line of goods and services that had to increase in prices because of that. Lowest ever in June 2022, 8 states each recorded their lowest state jobless rate in history. Some can see it as a good thing. Some can point to it as a negative, since the lowest unemployment rate always triggers a warning sign for a recession coming very soon afterwards. There's many data that can be able to be seen as a recession now, and I'll put one on there that a lot of people have seen recently in the past couple of weeks. But we're talking about what's the most important thing to trigger what's considered a recession is when the unemployment rate goes from being here to starts going up. So I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you, how that's going to work, but that is an interesting statistic. And then the last one is we'll pull this, make it 7. Since repayments of federal student loans were suspended for 6 months, the CARES Act 327/2020, just saying that we've been suspended for student loans since March of 2020, and it ends the end of this month. Will they extend it again? We don't know. We will see. But as of right now, people are scheduled to start resuming student loan payments as of September. Mom, Ronda Johnson, what do you think about this data I just threw out there? Or just one data that, one of those 3 that sticks to you
Okay,
most?
so I'm going to start with a question, and the question is, how does the reenactment of the student loan repayments impact someone's ability to get a mortgage?
It's not going to affect us like that. For most programs, they have a certain percentage that we're going to use based off of the total balance of the student loans. That's going to be the initial thing we're going to use. So if we pull up a buyer's credit, they have $100K in student loans. For most programs, it's going to be either 1% or 0.5% of that balance is going to be considered a debt against them. So if it's the 1%, we're going to be using $1,000 debt. That's like having a very expensive car, or 2 very expensive, or 2 decently cars on the report. And if it's the 0.5% of 1,000 of 100,000, then we're going to be using $500 as a debt against that person. If we can't qualify them with those initial ratios, then we're going to ask the buyer to give us some sort of documentation showing that they're either on a plan or they're going to potentially be on a plan within the next few months or so, detailing what their payment is going to be on that plan, whether it's income driven, whether it's not income driven. Some programs want it to be amortizing, so they want it to have an end date. Other programs don't care as much if it doesn't have an end date. But many times we can take that, let's say that same $100,000 student loan buyer, and I had to use $1,000 a month for them. And with the plan, I can now use $300 a month, $200 a month, which helps them out a ton. But there you go.
Okay, so that is one of the major factors that
I apologize.
scares
This is
people.
not going to affect you though. Whether you're
That was
paying it
my
or not
question,
paying it,
right.
this is not going to affect me doing my job. It just may be easier for that buyer to find their paperwork to be able to send over to us when they got to think about it on a monthly basis. But it's not going to affect how we're going to do how we're going to qualify them.
Well, I've spoken with a lot of people because really, when you're in that situation, you think it's only you. Like, I have all of these student loans. I cannot afford to also get a house because these payments are coming due. And that's one of the factors that goes into play. And I really would love for you all to talk about that a little bit, because I spend a lot of time talking about that one factor, student loans.
Yeah.
A lot of people have student loans. So don't feel as though it's just you out there that have those, but it does not have to prevent you from getting a home. And so that one factor, I think, is important to spend some time discussing, because so many people have a fear about having to repay these student loans.
I'll piggyback off that one more time. The biggest thing I see with people that get into trouble, when people get in trouble with their student loans and they get in trouble with their mortgage, is they just don't reach out to the servicer of the student loans or the servicer of the mortgage. They'll start thinking, oh, I should do this, or I should call, or what payment plan, is it income driven, or they're going to deferment. They think, and then their kid gets sick, or they think, parent gets sick, or something happens at school, and that goes from priority number 1 to priority number 5 to priority number 10. And next thing you know, I'm pulling somebody's credit, and I see student loans that are in default. And we actually cannot close on any student. I'll tell you what this. There's collections, and a lot of collections do not matter at all. We give 0 about medical collections. We give 0 about collections that say they've been charged off. But student loan collections and collection, we cannot close on a loan with student loans that are in collection. So all you have to do is talk with the servicer, and most likely they're going to have a plan for you that's going to work out in your situation, whether it's having your normal plan, whether it's on an income plan, or whether it's having deferred where you're not making any payments right now for 12 months. I'm sure they're going to have something that works out for you. The same thing if you have a mortgage, and things get weird, you get laid off, you go run through your savings, speak with your servicer. As we've seen over the past couple of years, they have certain plans they can be able to do to keep you out of foreclosure, to keep you out of short sale. But you have to be able to pick up the phone or email to communicate with those servicers to be able to deal with them.
that segues into a really bigger issue that you're talking about as far as what's on my credit report, how to get. They're communicating with everybody involved. You know, there's such a fear in the general population surrounding that.
Yeah.
And having the relationships, I feel, helps to minimize that, because once you're dealing with real information and you have actionable information, life is always going to happen, but you have to have those relationships to guide you, to help you to say, this is the direction, this is what I need to go in.
Yeah.
So what I see is some people fall into the trap. They say, oh, I am working on fixing my credit. And I always say, let me get you with someone that understands what is needed specifically for a house.
Yes.
Because what you need for a car is not the same as what you need for a house. And a lot of times you're spinning your wheels working on something that does not need to be worked on.
Yeah.
And so could you talk a little bit about that? Because I know I have called you on those.
Yeah, don't work on your credit on your own. That's all you need to know. Don't touch it. Don't do anything. I don't care who told you, what site you said, Google, YouTube. Don't do anything on your. If you're trying to buy a house and you have any thoughts about credit, your job is to speak to a mortgage originator today. You can speak to myself. My information is going to be in the description, etc. Tanya, you can speak to her as well. She is bilingual. She can be able to assist you in English, Spanish, etc. If you have your best friends a mortgage originator, you feel comfortable with them knowing your information, speak with somebody today, because all of us have technology where not only are we seeing your credit, we're pretty good credit experts. I'm not gonna lie to you. I've dealt with many credit repair people. I'm probably 2 or 3 times better than the majority of them. I wish I had a credit repair person I could just be able to hand things off to help assist me, but they're just not as good as we are in our industry when we're seeing credit reports on a daily basis, and we're helping people on a monthly basis go from the 550 to the 600. Now they're qualified but don't have down payment assistance, to the 640 where they now do have down payment assistance. I've done that process so many times with so many people to where, and I had to tell them, hey, we're not going to touch these things in your credit report. I pulled a simulator, and the simulator says if we do these certain specific things, 95% chance your credit score is going to go to this number within 3 months. So don't do it on your own, because a lot of times you guys are doing disputes in the many programs. We have to have disputes removed to be able to actually close on a loan. And I'm dealing with a buyer right now who had a dispute, and it was a $0 balance dispute. I never, hey, in our business, we see things that we've never seen every single month, and we almost hit every single day. But $0 dispute, like, so the buyer doesn't even owe any money, but it said dispute on there. We had to have it removed. It dropped his credit score 3 points because, and now that buyer, is under contract. We had to find some alternative methods to be able to get them to close on a home. So don't touch anything on your credit on your own. Come straight to us, because we're going to give you methods that are going to allow you not only for your credit to improve, but also for you to get into a home.
So in other words, you're saying don't recreate the wheel and think that you can come up with your own plan. Get with a professional that actually does this. They can put it into a simulator, get you what you need to focus on, so you have an actionable plan that will allow you in 3, 6, 9, 12 months to purchase that home.
Once you're in a home, I don't care what you do with your credit. Dispute out the world. Go talk to a credit person. I don't care what you're doing when it comes to once you're actually in the home, because the credit is not going to matter as much once you're in the actual property. But if you're trying to buy a home, and we don't need an 800 score either, or even a 700 score. That's a very good thing people need to understand, is that, I mean, there's programs you can be able to get it with less than a 580, but for majority of the normal programs, we need over 580. If you have 2 borrowers around 580, 585, 590, we can be able to get you pre-approved, most likely. And if you're only by yourself, most likely it's going to probably be around 605, 610, 615 by yourself. But that's not for you to understand. Most likely, or most important, is for you to speak to myself, a mortgage originator, or another mortgage originator. We can be able to run those numbers, see if you're pre-approved, and if not pre-approved, give you an actionable plan to get you pre-approved.
But at least once a month, I hear someone say, oh, well, my credit's at 700, but I want to get it at 750 because I want a better interest rate.
My wife,
considering these interest rates.
my wife thinks a lot about credit.
Okay.
And I'm like, yo, trust me. There's an A plus here when it comes to this as well. Anything above a 740, so whether it's 740, 760, 780, 800, you're getting the same numbers. Like, this is not, they've trained you to think this is a game that you need to be able to have perfected. This is not a game you really need to even play. I'm a huge fan of Dave Ramsey, whether you like the guy or not. Like people playing the credit game all the time. It's not a necessary game. It's a game you can play, but it's not necessary. A majority of investors that I speak to who have a good amount of money, who have multiple properties, etc., they'll have credit scores in the mid 600s. You don't need those crazy high credit scores. As long as your credit is mid 500s, or preferably 580 or above, we're running the numbers through our system to try to get a pre-approval for you. What else you got? We'll see Gabriela.
Well, there's a lot, so I'm gonna try to pick the ones that first stood out the most to me, and then why that one in particular. So I know we'll talk a little bit more about the second point that you wrote, lowest ever in June 2022, 8 states, and then that they have the lowest states in jobless rates in historical source. So whenever we mention something like historical lows, historical highs, it's just a measuring point about something that, hey, it wasn't before, and this is the first time since we've been tracking this data that we have seen this number. So that is going to maybe impact when we discuss, well, not maybe, it will impact as we discuss not only unemployment, because unemployment increasing does stroke the fears of, oh my gosh, we're heading into that dark area where we don't want to go.
You don't want to say the word.
I don't even like, it's almost like if you say the word, it's like, hey, it's gonna happen. But then there's a counter of like how many jobs are added into the economy as well. So, if when we talk a little bit more about that, it's like when it's more like a sensationalized news line, like, hey, lowest ever or highest ever, you got to look at the counter to that. Like, what is the counterbalance to that? There's always, that's why Fed rates increase. They're countering something else. So when we look at the numbers, we got to look at what else is countering in its favor or against its favor. So that's the only mention I'm going to make on point number 2, because,
Gabriela.
yes, because, there's still more on that. The first point, that's the one that I'm maybe a little more passionate about, because I'm going to talk about it from like the consumer perspective. And that's a lot of the things that we do here when we're talking our podcast. Is like I like to talk about, like, how does the consumer feel about these things? Because even when you two were discussing about credit, it's like there is a mortgage credit score. And that is something that I actually had the opportunity to discuss when I was helping, I go out and help, realtors with open houses. And there's, by the way, realtors that are hearing this, just so you know, I know the laws. I know I'm not supposed to say certain things. I'm just supposed to smile, look pretty, open the door, and point everything back to the realtor. I respect everything that they're doing. However, when they're asking general lending questions, and when they're saying specifically about, oh, well, my credit is really bad. And I said, well, did you have your credit pulled? And they're like, well, I know it's bad. And I was like, well, when did you have your credit last pulled? And I was like, okay. My rebuttal to that is like, you don't know what your credit score really is until it's pulled. And even if it's a bad credit score, what you think is a bad credit score, it may really not be. And there are credit simulators, people that work in the industry that have that, the savviness to be able to help guide you on what to work on, what not to work on to help you with your credit. So that was kind of like my aha moment when I was in that open house and explaining to those buyers that walked in. They're about to get married, they're excited, they're happy, but they know that buying a home is one of their goals. And It's like, well, start the process now so that you know what you're looking at, because there's many things that you could do now that could actually either affect your ability to buy a home after you get married, taking out debts, getting into credit. So in that little short story, it was just great to actually come back, like, from being in this industry, working with individuals like Jon and our other loan originators in our team, and being educated that now as a consumer, I feel like it's my due diligence to say, no, that's false. That's not correct. You need to know your mortgage credit score if you're looking to buy a home. It doesn't matter, like, you have a mortgage credit score, and you have a score that affects how you buy a car, and you have a score that affects how you get a credit line. you need to know your mortgage credit score before you can do anything else in the home buying process. Don't be afraid. We understand that your finances are very private, personal. People get very protective about when they talk about their finances because they don't want to look like, that they're not doing well.
People are not doing as bad as they think they're doing.
Yeah.
Almost every single buyer that
yeah.
tells me, I always have an initial phone call.
Yeah.
That's like 5 minutes. Then I have the application. After the application is completed,
Yeah.
it could be anywhere from 10 to 15 for a consultation, or even someone's first time asking a ton of questions. I've done 30, 35 on those consultations afterwards. But that initial phone call, it's at least probably 60 to 70% of buyers I speak to who have some concern about their credit and I have this, I have that. They try to give me the breakdown. It's like, all right, thank you for the breakdown. Let me check it out myself.
They're worried about that hard pull.
That's actually what I just made a comment, a note about that, because that's what I actually wanted to mention was that it's not going to hurt your credit score. I repeat again, it's not going to hurt your credit score. I've read all the credit books. I'm pulling credit all the time. It's not going to hurt. The most I've ever seen is 1 or a 2-point hit. And credit scores go in 20-point ranges when it comes to mortgages. So anything from a 620 to a 640 gives you the exact same numbers. 640 to 660, exact same numbers. 660 to 680, exact same numbers. So it's not going to hurt your score. If there's a buyer that I actually need to increase their score for, like I need to get them into a range where they can get down payment assistance or a range where they're pre-approved, etc. That's when I'm going to give them actual specific advice that can be able to increase their score within normally 30 to 90 days. If we need to be able to do that. But that initial pull is not going to hurt the score. I have buyers that I'm helping increase their credit that every single month I'm pulling their credit and their credit is going up 15, 20 points every single month.
So from a real estate perspective, one of the first questions I always ask when someone calls and asks about a home is, have you spoken with the lender? Are you pre-approved? The reason for that is because, not that I don't want to spend time with you, but it's important for you to have a starting point, a plan to know this is where I am, and it's based on real facts, not something you've heard. And I also want to emphasize, your relationships are so important. I'm a relationship person, but you have to speak with someone who is current on what's happening today. So someone who purchased a house a year ago, as we've been discussing earlier, the market is different now.
Yeah.
Someone who purchased 5 years ago, someone who has, I'm going to just use this. There are, TV shows that we watch now, and they are occurring in Waco, Texas. Okay, but we're over in Central Florida.
Yeah.
Our markets are different. Therefore, talk to someone who is current and up to speed on what's going on now so that they can help you get a plan. So you mentioned down payment assistance.
Yeah.
Some people are looking at, wow, if I have to go out there and purchase a $350,000 house, how much money do I need to save up? Let me start saving up. Once again, know exactly what you need by speaking with an expert up front. So therefore, you're making informed decisions. You're putting your money where it needs to go to help you ultimately reach that goal more efficiently. And that's what we work together to try to make happen.
Good.
So before you switch that slide, I am going to talk about number 1 and finish my point on that. So, and the only reason why it's a supply and demand issue that happened with slide number 1. And specifically when we're talking about when those took place, yes, the videos of the barges and everything hanging out, over on the West Coast, waiting to, they couldn't get in. We get it. There was a supply and demand issue. There was a worldwide, pandemic, economic impact. There was also, the leadership at the time also, as you said, if they made a tweet about China, something was going to happen as well. But the supply chain issue was number 1 affected. Also, the infrastructure was affected. And what ended up happening with supply and demand as people were moving out of certain areas, big areas, maybe moving into other areas, is that the cost of goods to build went up. And where do we get a lot of our building materials if they're not made in the U.S.? Yep, you said it. I know we're on the same page here. So while they're saying that, hey, it went from 2,500, then it went up to 20,000. supply demand. There's a higher demand than there was a supply available, and it was affected by its ability to get over here, and also the manufacturing that took place, over as well in China and other countries as well. We get supplies from many places, not just China, but they are one of the biggest suppliers. So then now we're looking at the cost of it going down to 9,500. So that may be the new settling normal cost, but we're also dealing with the cost of fuel. We're dealing with that's a big consumer issue, like, oh, the cost of gas. I mean, people were like having and I understand $5 a gallon in the state of Florida was like, that is crazy, it's unheard of, and they wanted to blame someone for it. But we talk about, like, when you talk about local issues, you also have to be educated on your national and your world issues, and that tends to be a lot of the things that individuals sometimes get overwhelmed with. I don't think it's that they don't purposely want to. It's so overwhelming to be involved not only in your community news, your local news, your state news, your national news, and now you're adding international news, and how all of that ties together, supply and demand, and now we're at 9,500, and that may be the number for a while. And even if there is a change in that, we have to get used to just like the new normal.
So beyond that number, I think it's important. I want to piggyback on what you're saying and make it relevant for the housing world.
Yes.
So when you have new homes being built, which for a while we were not having new homes built. Now we started to see that uptick in new homes, and even that shifting right now. But I want to make a point about the supply and demand thing. So year over year, what we saw between 20 and 21, we saw a 30% increase in the cost of basic supply in order for that builder to build. And of course, that's going to be transferred over to the buyer.
As any product is.
Right. I had builders telling me, we cannot get bathtubs because they're out on a boat somewhere, a ship out there in the ocean.
Yeah.
So that's going to slow down your cycle for getting that house out there.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. So their builder contracts started changing with their buyers.
Yeah.
So I want to emphasize too, even when you're going to a new build community, take your experts that you've already established with you, because many people in those new build communities are salespeople. They are not certified, educated. Some are, but the majority of them are not. You need someone that's looking out for your best interest, even when you're walking into a new build community. I just talked to a client earlier this week about that same thing. You need someone protecting your interests that's going to say, hey, have you considered this? That's why you talk to an experienced expert. I am glad to know that things are leveling off, but we are not over the hump by any chance. We're still experiencing some of the impact of that backlog even now, where even if it goes from a trust, just to a basic tool. Some of the screws that weren't available that was needed, and
my dad even said that. Like, my dad was doing home projects. He's like, my dad, I was a little professor, but I said I'm a daddy's girl. So, grew up, as he's a handyman, this is his main project, and now he's doing, small things in the home. And he's like, I got a sheet of plywood, and I used to cost, now it's like 4 times that cost. And even my father, I'm like, Dad, and he's like, and of course, he added his own personal commentary, and I said, in my calm daughter voice, said, Dad, it's just not how it used to be 40 years ago. Sorry.
Sometimes it goes that way. Sometimes prices jump for a period of time. Sometimes you have a brief period of inflation, and whatever the old norm used to be, milk used to cost X, and now the new norm is milk costs this. The goal, hopefully, the people powers to be can get inflation under control, but most likely we're not going to see deflation. Most likely it's going to be inflation's been pretty high the past year or two, and then hopefully it stops. But that doesn't mean it's going to jump back down. This will just be the new norm.
The counterbalance.
Yep.
Everything has to have a counterbalance.
Yep. All right. Fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the stuff that I like to see because it counters a lot of what people see out there in the news. It counters a lot of what real estate agents say because a lot of them just go for feelings rather than actually seeing the data. And so, I mean, hey, you're a prepared person. I didn't tell you anything we're going over today and you took it upon yourself to have a clipboard, not even just have a clipboard, but you put, tons of information on the clipboard. I don't know how you can follow your clipboard, but that's how.
Average days in the market.
Sure. You take care of her, Gabriela. You take care of
You
her.
know why? Because I stay informed, and that's what anybody that really loves what they do, they're going to stay on top of what's going on. This isn't something I just did for you today. This is something I keep a pulse on all the time.
Good for you. I'm proud of you. You were doing a good job. Congratulations. All right. So we have active listing count, and then we also have days on market. There's many things I can put up here. Once again, this is national data. We're going to more regional data and even some Florida data. But for right now, this is active data looking at listing count. So listings that are people can be able to go on Zillow, Keller Williams app, Redfin, etc., be able to find homes. And then also days on market, which is the main thing of how we decide whether we are in a buyer's market or a seller's market. And it's also broken down into years. So the golden line is 2022, green line is 2021, and then we have 2020 blue, and then the other lines are the years past. That's on both of them. Some big statistics that I'm seeing from this is that, as you can see, yes, our active listings are going up. Year over year in July, we're up 30% versus where we were at last year. But if you look at, even just 2 years ago, we still don't have the number of listings that we had 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years, 5 years ago, etc. We don't have the number of listings that we need. Days on market is going to show you what type of market that we're actually in. And this is the time of year where days on market only goes up a little bit. But as you can see, it was already, these numbers, days on market, were close to the lowest of all times historically, 30 days on market. And by the way, 6 months is considered a neutral market, a balanced market. That means that buyers and sellers, they both have an equal play when it comes to a majority of times in the transaction. If it's more than 6 months that homes are being on the market, that means that buyers have more control over the market. They can be able to control how those deals go. And if it's less than 6 months, that means that sellers in general have more control over what's happening in the market. As you can see, over the past 4 to 5 years, we have been in a buyer's market, a very decent buyer's market. In the past 2 years, we've been in a heavy seller's market. Thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. Over the last 2 years, the last 4 to 5 years, we've been in a decent seller's market. In the past 2 years, we have been in a very heavy seller's market. And even though our listings have doubled, we still have extremely low amount of inventory, which means we're still in a very big seller's market. So this is the news, what you're going to see in the news all the time, active. You're going to see, listings have gone up, inventory has gone up. That means that, this will be a housing crash. But that's not the stat that matters, in my opinion. The stat that matters is how quickly are these homes still being sold. And from what I'm seeing, they're still being sold very quickly. Real estate agent in the house.
Call on me. I want to put all of this into perspective.
Go ahead.
So you say, what is going on here? What's really happening? Well, first of all, beyond Florida being the place to be, Florida is absolutely beautiful. Don't believe what you're reading here. Florida is, I love to travel. I have been to many of the states, including a lot of the islands surrounding us. And I tell you, Florida is beautiful. So what's happening, we did anticipate some of this in that as the baby boomers age, we anticipated that they no longer would want to shovel snow.
Yes.
And that they would want to have a more relaxed lifestyle.
Yes.
So we have what we call snowbirds here. And I came from the healthcare industry. So in the healthcare industry, we always knew to adjust our trends for what you expect to see, especially in emergency room settings and, for the more acute care things. For the baby boomers, certain times of year things are going to trend. Well, not the baby boomers, but for the people that were the snowbirds. Yeah. So now what we're seeing is people are saying, hey, we do not want to shovel snow anymore. Let's come to Florida. Yeah. Okay, on top of that, our climate is really good. And overall, we do have affordability. We talk about the average home price, the average price of a home. Overall, Florida is affordable. We do not have a state tax. So that's something that a lot of people find attractive. Yeah. So let's go into what happened. Now we have Corona effect. what happened with Corona is, okay, so we're in like the big metropolitan areas. And I walk out my door and right there's my neighbor, or there's like a bunch of us here. And we're like, wait a minute, you mean I can sell up here, go to Florida and get me some land around me, maybe get a pool in the backyard? Absolutely. So that combined with the baby boomer effect kind of sent us into this, come on to Florida, come on to Florida. I'm telling you, still come to Florida because Florida is beautiful, but that's kind of what we're seeing. And that's why you're seeing our inventory like it is as well. We already had for the past years that transition occurring. Then you put on top of it what happened with what I call the Corona effect. And that's when you got what we call this super, like, you know how you have a superstorm? It's a super seller's market. But overall, Florida still is, my granddaughter would say, popping.
Thank you for adding the humor.
Oh, my
Comedian mom, Ronda, appreciate it.
You gotta come back. I promise. You got to
We'll see.
come
We'll
back.
see. We'll see. We'll see. One quick note as well.
Safety, the neighbor, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
You know, he forgets I
Thank you for doing that as well. I appreciate that. I think Dan appreciates it as well.
Yeah.
One quick note about this too.
Yeah.
This is national data. You're going to see when I show the next in 2 slides from now some regional data. You're going to see how whatever I'm putting on here nationally does not completely correlate to what may be happening in the South versus the West versus the North, etc. Gabriela, you guys, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
About 3 years ago, around 3 to 5 years ago, Florida actually surpassed New York in population.
Yeah.
So we became the 3rd most populous state in the United States, behind California and Texas.
Yeah.
And so that has also had a great impact. But all of that is a result of what we've been talking about. We do have great climate the majority of the time. If something happens here, it's typically predictable and we know what's going to happen. We have lovely beaches. No one really knows how many lakes are here. There's so many, and it's just beautiful living. We are the Sunshine State for a reason. And a lot of people are finding that attractive, as well as we've had growth in different types of jobs that are here. There have been some big players that have moved into our area that have kind of helped stabilize that a little bit. So I'm just kind of, what are you laughing at? Your mom knows a little information?
Good job. Good job. What else you got, Gabriela?
Oh, yeah, there was some background cheer for you, by the way.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
Yeah, it was background cheers and that happened. So this is where you shine. This is your area of expertise, and when we talk about it, Jon does have the advantage of definitely talking more, with more realtors. I have different conversations as well. So my conversations, because I'm not licensed as a loan originator or a realtor, I have like what I would like to call like delay conversations, like casual consumer, casual, like, hey, what's going on kind of conversations. But there is every single point that both of you have made regarding this chart is exactly correct. And I cannot stress the fact that you said not only the baby boomers, and then let's just add the anomaly of the Corona effect, because we can call it whatever we want, but it was in the fact an anomaly that occurred that shouldn't have occurred, but unfortunately it did. Just like the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, many different things have happened in worldwide, and if we talk specifically about in the U.S. that have affected consumers, housing markets, you name it. But the baby boomers, and this will always stick with me for the past since 2005, very specific, because this is when I really started to get educated more about, consumerism and how that exactly impacts, by the way, in 2005, I was 25. So this is like now like the awakening of information.
Well, I'm still 25, so we're rolling.
We are.
Yeah, the young
And
bucks.
there was the education piece about how baby boomers drive the market. Everything. They drive everything. Baby boomers drove everything from what happened in the homes, the sale of bigger vehicles, the rise in food chains, dual income households. From there,
more vacations, more places to travel to, and looking at family planning. Baby boomers, we love, we respect everything they've done because they are truly the generation that had to endure and overcome. And from
That
the,
is such a good point. Thank you for making that.
you're very welcome,
That's a
because it is
very
very
good
true.
point.
You know, my
The
parents are
two
baby
women
boomers.
that care. We have them in the same
Oh,
building,
man,
the same room.
grab a tissue,
Way too much care.
grab a
All the care in
tissue,
the world.
because this is where it strikes
These
home
are
for the
facts.
consumer.
Facts.
And they're
So
not,
much care.
and the facts coupled with the fact that it is true that not only do the baby boomers have they impacted every single, economic decision that the nation has had to make, infrastructure, everything, all right? Now we're talking about, when you said you were about healthcare, I was in home care. So,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
no, that's
Oh,
all.
man. All right, it's been great, guys.
Hold on.
I've had fun today.
So I was in home care, over 4 years ago for about a period of about 5 years and stuff. So going into visiting different facilities, in home care, non-medical in home care and stuff. And so it was there when you walk into the homes and you got to see, baby boomers also learned how to save money. They had to become more fiscally responsible because not only did they endure World War II, they stemmed from World War II because that's
There you Oh my girl, you
Yeah,
put it all
history.
together.
This is where the history of how, what we're looking at when we look at numbers, then we have to look at the historical context of things as well, is that, so from World War II, here comes the baby boomer generation that's driven everything that I just mentioned. Now, then you have this new generation, the millennials. I'm Gen X, so the Gen X generation, we're in that middle.
I'm white. I get confused. I think I'm white.
You got like a Z. Continue.
No, you're an honorary Generation X because we're the generation that got to see the transition of not only when we talk about music, culture, as well as a lot of economic impact that happened during the 70s and 80s and 90s markets as well. And also Gen X generation was that generation that was in the crash of 2007, 2008. They were going into that housing market. And
Oh God.
yeah, so yeah. There, by the way, TikTok and all the social medias that are making these videos, you're right, Generation X is a little savage, that is the colloquialism that we're going to use it for social media, because of the things that generation had to endure, which made us weary about becoming consumers. And not only that, also economic disparity, wages, you name it. There's all these factors that go into buying a home as well. Also, we're that generation that was still pushed to get an education, get your degree, get into debt, get into student loans. We talked about student loans earlier,
wow,
okay? So let's bring all this full
So
circle.
you're addressing the psyche of the purchasing and why we kind of do what we do.
She cares.
And when you understand all of those factors combined, not only with historical, generational, economic, cultural, then you can have a conversation with somebody who is so skeptical about buying or selling at this time, because you address their concerns, you address their fears, and you lay out like, hey, change is inevitable, change is going to happen, but we are in a better place because of what happened in 2007, 2008, laws were put in place that avoided, that was more regulations on predatory lenders. All right. And even I believe that even from this period, there's going to be some new changes in laws as well that come in the real estate industry. We're also seeing that in the homeowners insurance industry. We won't even talk about that, and we don't have the time to talk about the homeowners insurance industry.
Maybe that would be a good topic for one of your future sessions.
We are going to have somebody come in and do it
Beautiful.
in the office as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but if John would like to have somebody come in as well, that would be great to discuss that. So in one chart, I am pulling out all of this information to show you nationwide. And when you brought in the baby boomers, I'm like, yes, the driving economic force
and now they're coming down here. Why Florida? Because we don't have state income taxes. They want to preserve the remaining wealth and get the biggest bang for their buck. So they sell high where they live. They buy here where it's considered low for them, but it's still very affordable and average compared to other markets. And yes, there is a rising need for housing. So we're getting more builders, that are building homes. I am going to end on that note from this guy because
I'm sorry, she's touched on something and it's really just pulling at me. So we're gonna have to stay here for a moment. If you're okay with that.
Holy smokes.
So you mentioned the Dust Bowl earlier.
The woman that cared.
And let's take it back because my grandmother came from that Great Depression era. And I'm gonna try to talk about this without being tearful, but
Here we go.
that was 100
ready.
years ago, right?
Yeah.
The exact same thing was going on. So 1919, you had, and I'm gonna call them plagues. You had the flu, the Spanish flu,
Yeah.
right? So that was going on.
Yeah.
Then you had the Dust Bowl. You had all of this going on at the same time. So it kind of mirrors what we had going on today.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about, they came through that. So from the perspective of purchasing, working, saving, buying a home, my grandmother was what you would call ultra conservative in her patterns and behaviors because she came from that Great Depression era through World War II. My grandfather was in World War II. So their children now came and picked up, we got the Korean War, the Vietnam, okay? We talk about the baby boomers, they sacrificed a lot. They worked really hard to get what they had. So then you had the generation that came behind them, they're watching this.
Yeah.
And they are learning from both those that went through the Great Depression and then those that are now what we're calling the baby boomers, right?
Right.
And then now they've birthed the current generation that we're seeing. And where do they all play? Now, don't sleep on the millennials because they, at the time, the baby boomers were the greatest generation because they were birthed out of the war. Oh, we got babies coming back now.
Yeah.
Where we
Oh,
united. That's why they were so huge. Well, the millennials, you kind of have that same thing going on there. They're huge. They're huge in volumes, and even though their perspectives are different, ultimately, everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants the same thing. So now they have had the ability, if they were fortunate enough, to benefit from those generations before, and they're putting it all together and packaging it, and coupled with the internet, I'm gonna do my own research, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll have a point.
Influencers,
I'll have a point for starting, right? So I think I just really love the fact that you brought that all together because it does influence buying patterns.
Yes.
All right, we'll get you two ladies for lunch. Good. Even a light said, let's make it happen. All right, good. Next one, median listing price versus price reduced share. So once again, back to the previous slide, we're looking at active listings have gone up, but days on the market are still extremely low, especially considering the last couple of years, but historically as well. So now we're at median listing price. The prices are a lot higher than they were in the years past. We expect there to be some sort of appreciation. Economists want there to be 5%, 4 to 5% appreciation in the housing market year over year. We're currently at 16%. It has flattened off a little bit, but as you can see in years past, it goes up from January to May, and then it flattens off a little bit. In the last couple months of the year, it trends slightly down the last couple months of the year. So it's not doing anything too different from what I'm saying, but year over year, we are 16% more than we were last year, which still is a good amount. Price reduced share, so this is just price reductions. This is the number that real estate agents, especially in Tampa, are going crazy over. There's so many price reductions, which means that there's going to be, a big, huge change and shift in the market. Potentially, we're watching it, in my opinion, over the next couple of months. We're getting towards where it was a few years ago when it comes to the share of homes that are having price reductions. In my opinion, from what I'm seeing, if a home is priced correctly, there are tons of buyers still out there snipping at it, trying to put offers in and trying to get the home. But if homes are priced incorrectly, you could unfortunately get some crickets out there because the buyers that are in the market right now have been in the market for 6, 12, 18 months, and they're a little bit more savvy because they're not just putting offers in on just anything, in my opinion. What are you seeing from this special guest?
I'm going to bring it all together, okay? When we talk about Dave Ramsey, he had a special on TV, and like I said, I eat, sleep, and drink this stuff. So I listened to something he said, and it's so true. So I'm just going to paraphrase that. The markets have been artificially inflated over the Corona period because we had such, well, like supply and demand, you mentioned earlier. Correct. We had such a high demand, and I'm talking about local. I'm not talking about national. I'm a local expert, so I'm going to stick to what I know. So within our local area, we had an artificial increase in prices. So when you have, you mentioned realtors, not all realtors are freaking out because there are price adjustments. Price adjustments are a normal part of the market. Remember, the realtor comes in and they try to give you, as a client, a picture of this is what the market looks like. But it's ultimately that seller that makes the decision. So if a seller hears a friend next door say, hey, I put my house on the market and I sold it for $100,000 over this price, and yes, it has happened, then that person is going to say, well, wow, I need to put mine on the market so I can get $100,000 over this price. Now, a realtor may say, well, the market is saying X, Y, and Z, not based upon one house selling, correct, but the market as a whole. But that seller ultimately sets their list price. So when you take that into consideration, a market adjustment as far as the price is concerned, I see it as more normalizing, not a negative thing. So please don't look at it as a negative thing. It's normalizing. You'll still make a profit. You'll still come out on top for the most part, depending upon your individual situation. But as a whole, you may not get that abnormal blip that was there, but we're normalizing, which is healthier for everyone as a whole. That abnormal situation may be good for one or two people, but it's not healthy for the population as a whole to sustain over an extended period of time.
Sure. I'll make a quick note off what you just stated. Listing agents a lot of times they are really in there trying to do what's best for the client, to try and say, hey, yes, your friend sold for 100K, but market's shifting a little bit. I think your home would come in at this amount based on certain data. The reason why we end up moving from a seller's market to a buyer's market is from sellers not listening to listing agents. It's from sellers putting more homes out there on the market by themselves, FSBOs, for sale by owner, rather than actually using an agent. And those cause it to go from a seller's market to a buyer's market, because buyers get to the point where, like, we're not going to just pay, anything for any property. Unfortunately, so the good listing agents that I know, they'll give the seller the data, and the seller wants to do whatever they want. They'll say, all right, we'll do this for 1 week, we'll do this for 2 weeks. And if you have crickets for that period of time, they either take back control or they're firing that seller, because it's much better to fire that seller than to waste your time and have a listing out there for 2 months or for 3 months when homes are still selling in 30 to 45 days. Gabriela, any comments on this?
The only additional comment that I will make in regards to what you're saying, because these are things that we've discussed before, and in your perspective as a realtor also brings a lot of value to what we've been discussing as well, is that, at the end of the day too, when we're looking at the financing side of things, the appraisal value. And that makes that can change the negotiation or can change the sale completely. And because that's the number that, as from the lending side, that we're going to go, okay, look, that home appreciated for X, Y, and Z dollars. So, unfortunately, when it does come to that, all we have to look at when we look at as far as like the market per se is that the competitive market, CMAs, that the realtors, do. The appraisers also do the exact same thing, is that they're looking at a local area based on the homes that have been sold in the past, is it 6 months, if I'm correct? Or
so you want the most recent comparable. So you
So, yeah.
want to see what's in that immediate area.
Yeah.
If you have something within 90 days, that's beautiful, just like your statistics. We're always
months is
looking at
what
a snap in time. Most of the appraisers do not want to go over 6 months. There are times and exceptions when they have to, when you have a unique property. Sometimes you have to go out in the immediate area if you're dealing with a unique property. But for the most part, you want to keep it as close as possible, and you want to keep it within that time frame of not more than 6 months.
Okay, yeah, so that goes as far as it could be appraisal, and then also when you're doing, and you're correct, that at the end of the day, the seller does make those decisions, and you are correct. You know, there's sometimes, you know, the realtors say, well, listen, we'll do it for this much. And realtors that are, you know, there are realtors who have been in this business for quite some time and they're nervous about it. It goes back to, you know, it's a shifting market, and individuals, it's an individual thing, having to deal with change.
Yes, and you mentioned FISBOs, for sale by owners.
Yeah.
A lot of that, you would ask, why would anyone want to take on that responsibility themselves? And that comes from the fact that, okay, education, there's information is available, right? And so I can look out here on the Zillows of the world and I can get a really good idea of where it may fall in. But there are little nuances to every property that you really want to have an expert look at. And one of the key things so what for sale by owners say, well, I don't have to pay a real estate commission if I do it myself. But with a real estate commission, you are now getting targeted marketing, more international marketing, but on top of that, you're getting the reliability of knowing that a buyer that's coming to see your house is not coming just to look at your house. They're someone who has been qualified to purchase your house. So therefore, when a realtor brings someone to your home, they're bringing a qualified buyer, not just a looky-loo, which is a safety issue, but it's also making sure you're reaching your targeted market more effectively. So the little real estate commission actually could get you more bang for your buck faster, and also take that worry off of your scheduling appointments. You're wondering if this buyer really can buy this home, because experienced realtors not only just say, okay, I have to have your pre-approval, but they'll pick up the phone and they'll talk to that lender who is behind that pre-approval. Okay? So those are just some food for thought.
You were correct. Home sell for more with a real estate agent than by themselves, a lot more. Good. Regional data. So I mentioned that, you know, we just saw national data, but when it comes down to it, whether you're in the Midwest, the West, the North, the South, etc., it's going to differ based off whether you're in those areas. So the top is June 2020 regional data, and the bottom is July 2022 regional statistics for the largest metros. There's the Midwest, Northeast, South, and West data. Some interesting things to be able to see on this: active listing count. So we saw that list. There's a lot more homes on the market, but if you're in the Northeast, you're not really seeing that. You're seeing a slight increase over last year. Midwest, you're seeing an increase, but it's not some astronomical amount. If you are in the South, and more specifically, if you are in the West, you are seeing an astronomical more increase in homes that are actually on the market. 72% in the West, 55% in the South. But if you actually keep continuing on and look at some of this data, more listings does not mean that the home's on the market for a longer period of time. As you can see, we'll go to the second to last column, median days on market. It's increased a little bit, but 2 days is not going to change you from a seller's market to a buyer's market. You need for that to say it's going up 30 days, 45 days to see some actual changes in numbers. In the Northeast and the Midwest, it's actually stayed the same amount of days on the market. So overall, this is the data we're looking at right now when it comes to how it's looking in the different parts of America. The data is consistent, but it does change slightly from location to location. What are you seeing quickly off this data?
I think it really summed it up. Yeah, I'm seeing what you're saying.
Good. Thanks. Appreciate it. Look at you agreeing with your boy.
I am agreeing.
Good.
Yeah, that's the simplest data. There isn't much to, we definitely have covered, we've added a lot of context to get to actually this slide. at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
And a little bit more fun stuff is going to be the Florida data. So this is going to be right up your alley as an agent. And I mean, for us, yes, I'm in the Tampa Bay area, but we close loans in Tampa, Central Florida, Tallahassee, and we're even licensed in other states, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, etc. So
What about Duval? Don't forget Duval.
I don't know about Duval.
Okay.
All right, so these are the
Shout
top.
out Duval.
You shout them out. These are the top metros in the state of Florida. So we have Miami, and I did it by purchase price too, median listing price. So Miami is absolutely dominating when it comes to listing price, the median listing price. So median means the one in the middle. So you put 100 listing prices on the table, it's going to be the one that's number 50. Orlando Kissimmee is next at 464. Jacksonville medium is 450. Tampa is actually 447. So we actually have the lowest out of the big metros in the state of Florida. The top is June and the bottom is July, just like the last slide. So I'll look at the July data for you guys. And I apologize. Look at this. Miami actually dropped a little bit when it came to their median list price, but it's still 625. It's still pretty high up there. Orlando 464, so it's the same. Jacksonville dropped from 450 to 435. Tampa went from 447 to 440. So we have seen a little decrease in the median list price just in our Florida counties. When we're looking at, let's see, days on the market, Miami 42 is going up a little bit from last month, 38. It was 31 in Orlando area, 35, Jacksonville, 29 in Tampa. So Tampa is pretty hot. And the active listing count year over year, you can see how much listings have gone up. Once again, this is regional because they're Northeast and the Midwest. It was around 0% on the last slide. They weren't really going up too much, maybe 3%. I can't remember. But look at Tampa Bay, 91%. We have almost double the inventory that we had last year. Jacksonville, 58%, Orlando, 67%, and Miami, their market, they're not even seeing more homes that are on the market. So even in the state of Florida, data is still slightly different when you go from one metro to the next metro. These are just the big metro data. We're not talking about the rural data right outside of it. We're not talking about from one neighborhood to the next neighborhood because that changes as well. It'll change slightly less, but it'll still be changing from, real estate is a very local neighborhood game. What are you seeing from this?
Well, it seems to align with everything that we've been saying. One of the things I wanted to emphasize is, over the past year, we've been seeing Tampa fall into some of the national trends and saying, hey, they have the highest growing rate of home prices. But then you just put that in perspective. Okay, so that's comparing the growth rate of the price itself. But what you're saying is, well, no, we're kind of normalizing a little bit here. So I would like if you could expound upon a little bit, because I'm a real estate expert and this is your area of expertise. I want you to expound upon what that means as far as purchasing a home and your buying power. Because some people may get scared when they hear some of those national trends.
Yeah, so we jumped up. There's only a couple of things that matter when you're buying a home from a mortgage number's perspective. You're gonna have a monthly payment, you're gonna have a cash to close, and the thing I want people to be able to think about, but they can't normally think about this until they've had a couple homes, is how much equity are you building over life of the loan. That last one we'll kind of leave out. That's what you're gonna be doing on a 15 or 20-year mortgage, which a lot of people are not doing that because the monthly payment may be too high for those. But on the first two, your monthly payment, your cash to close is going to go up some by going to the higher purchase prices, but it's not an astronomical leap year over year when it comes to buyers. So let's say if the average home last year was 300K in the area and now it's 350K in the area, and you're putting minimum down 3 to 5%, 3 to 5% if you're a first time buyer, your cash to close may have gone up by, it'll go up less than 5K, which is a change, but it's not astronomical. Monthly payments is the big one that people have had to deal with. Someone that was pre-approved 8 months ago for a 300K home versus now for a 300K home, that same buyer is looking at monthly payments that are $300 a month higher than it was before. And people can scratch and find ways a lot of times to be able to get the cash to close, down payment assistance programs. Even now we're seeing some more seller credit come back into it. But that monthly payment is the main one people are going to be thinking about it. And it's jumped up, but as we're seeing now, it is normalizing a little bit. Yes, year over year, as we saw in the previous slides, home prices have gone up, but those home prices are normalizing a little bit, especially this time of year where they normally normalize. The rate jumped up, but it's still not on that steep incline right now. It's not like, next week, 6.5%, a week after that, 7%. I don't have a crystal ball. It could do that, but from what everyone's seeing right now, they don't see it still having that steep incline. It can still increase, but it's not astronomical. So as long as people understand it and realize this is what the current numbers are at, this is what the current monthly payments are at for the home you're looking for, this is the current cash to close for the home you're looking for. As long as they got those two in line, go out there and buy the home.
Wow. So may I add on a piece of it with Gabriela, but you hit on something.
Go ahead.
And it
Go
kind
ahead.
of hit a nerve for me. And let me tell you why it hit a
You
nerve.
got
Because
to
you hit on my why. You hit on my why do I do this? I am trained in healthcare administration. That's my background. That's where I went to school. But I'm so passionate about home ownership. You hit on my why when you said you were going to put that bucket aside when you're talking about the asset piece.
If I can push that, I push it.
Yeah, but I'm going to tell you why. Because most people are living with what can I handle today? But my why behind why I love real estate so much is because it is the biggest asset that most people have in their life. And it provides an opportunity to change the trajectory of where one group of people is going over time. That's why I love real estate. When you look at the founding fathers, they had this concept of owning a piece of the land. So let's stick with that, owning a piece of the land and what it can do for the next generation. Because each of us have a hash mark that we're living in between. And our legacy lies in what we're able to leave for that next generation. So when we look at that, if you are a parent, an aunt, a grandparent, you put it into perspective. If real estate is the one thing that has stood solid over the years that will pretty much appreciate, and you look at what contribution that could have to future generations, if you want to leave them something, leave them a piece of the land. It's something you can tap into in times of need. It's something wherein the future generation does not have to work as hard to even start off on a level playing field. It ties into the sense of community, building community. And I'm going to expound a little bit more. And I'm sorry for taking so much of your time, but you did get a nerve with that. So one of my fondest memories of growing up was I played softball in a little community league. There were the older generation that encouraged the younger generation so much. So playing softball, we would go around from community to community to play softball. And this older generation, a lot of them didn't drive anymore. And what would happen was there were a few people who drove at the time. They would load up these people, go back with their force and bring them so they would come to our games in a different community and they would cheer us on. These same guys, as I walked through the community, they would be shortstop. There she is. Nothing can stop her. And they might have been on a limited income. But when they got that check, that Social Security, the retirement check, whatever it was at the beginning of the month, they would pull out $1 and give me back to me. Keep it up, shortstop. That meant a lot to me as a person, as a kid. That little bit of encouragement that I got from my community. Then you go to the store, the corner store. The owners of the store would donate drinks, snacks for our little team. And our little team was all a part of that community. I never forgot that feeling. That's the beauty of home ownership. And I'm gonna just let that sit right there.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh.
I'll hold your hand. Thank you for sharing. Go ahead, Gabriela.
No, there sometimes it is just best not to add. You know, that is the beauty of community, is the strength of our, not just our neighborhoods, our cities, you know, Tampa, I've lived here practically all my life. I've seen it change in so many different ways. And what Tampa has given to me and what I've given back will never be enough. It will never be enough. And the only addition to your beautiful story, thank you for sharing that, is the land. It's the home. I have seen homes in my neighborhood, that homes that I remember driving by, and I recall this from a podcast that we discussed, going down Havana, heading south, and homes that have been there since like the like 70s and sometimes even 40s, like, you know, older homes. And they're gone, but a new home is built. The land didn't change, the home changed. And so that piece of land now transformed for somebody else, a new family, a new generation. And that is the wonderful thing about being in the community that you've been in for so long, that you get to see all those things. I still eventually at some point will move away, because I believe in my heart that I will be here for a time and a season. But those are those memories that you were talking about.
Yeah.
You know, that brings, they'll always be part of like why I love Tampa. Even as many people that have decided to move here, you know, this is a wonderful city. The good, the bad, and the ugly. It's not the city, it's the people.
All right. So you heard from the two ladies that care. This is a podcast to help you move to Florida. I've determined that for today. That is the theme for today is, if you don't live in Florida, it's time to move to Florida. There, my mother, Ronda Johnson, representing Duval in Central Florida. We have Gabriela representing Tampa Bay area. I'm representing all the robots that are out there. So if you're a robot or a computer, I'm here to represent you. I have more slides, but I think we've done enough for today. We've covered a lot of data, a lot of emotion, a lot of feelings, a lot of care. So I'll go ahead and finish it off with this. Any last quick thoughts for you two ladies?
Thank you very much. This has been very rewarding. Yeah. And I've watched you, and I thank you for having me here today. And so glad that we have such good chemistry.
You got it. The ladies that care. We'll get you two to lunch one day.
Oh my God.
Gabriela.
Every podcast is always going to be like, oh my God, I love that podcast and I love the next one. And today was just so much better and so much more positive and just so much well-rounded, because you were able to come in today and then provide your insight, you know, as a realtor, and not just, you know, not just the mortgage, you know, lending educator, as musician expert over there, and not your average, you know, marketer of the
Robot.
year. You know,
That's your average robot.
Say, don't pump it up, don't pump it up, don't pump it up.
Thank you.
You know,
Sure.
that
You
is-
make the grandkids.
but that is, you know, the purpose of when you started the podcast was to help educate people, and education also comes with, you know, tying the story to something that resonates with people. You know, homeownership is about resonating with people. You know, this may not be geared towards investors, but I can assure you that an investor selling the home is also going to impact a family. You know, so.
And that investor has to have someone to stay as well.
Yep.
You got it. Well, hey, this has been a wonderful episode. August, whatever date it is, in August 2022. I am Jon Johnson, the Mortgage Music Man. This is my mother, Ronda Johnson, a real estate agent.
RonJohnProperties.com. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Sure, that'll work.
What's your hashtag?
Oh. Okay, so I'm going to show
Oh,
my
man.
age now.
No,
Ron John Prop. Is that it? That's the hashtag?
hashtag,
Sure,
Ron
sure.
John
Ron John.
Sure, you got
Yes.
it. Gabriela, you got any socials you trying to throw out there?
You know, I can go through so many of them, but I'm going to stay true to the team one, and that's hashtag the Miller Team Home Loans.
right.
We are here for you, and we're going to continue bringing lovely, wonderful, insightful people to the podcast.
You got it. Well, great chat. Thank you all who have listened all the way through this. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.